a good leader should define the ditches in terms of, hey, I'm not expecting perfection. Here are the ditches of success and ones that an area that you don't want to venture into because it's too costly for the company. Rather than seek perfection with input from other people in the organization, provide some guidelines on what success looks like and then get there.
Today we have Kent Lammers on the podcast, and as you say, Kent, life is all about choices, and this is your second appearance. So we're grateful that you made the choice to come back on the Inspiring Innovation podcast.
Well, I'm glad you ran out of people so you could have me for a second time. So I appreciate that.
You're welcome. No, we're glad to have you back and excited because this is going to be the first episode in this new format that we're doing here with these cameras and Well, we'll get to pressure later. Okay.
All right. You bet. Sure.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thanks for coming again. And we're going to talk a lot about leadership today and some of the things that I feel like I heard you say in a Washburn presentation one time, to your alma mater. You were asked to come back and speak, which was something about nuggets and leaving. Why don't you?
Yeah,
I don't want to butcher that because I think there's more to it than I'm going to do it justice.
And actually, some of these things I've been fortunate to learn from a lot of other people. Mm-hmm, so a lot of it's nothing new, but things that I try to embrace and share with the team. A person once told me that there's people have golden nuggets, and each time that they can impart wisdom or an experience that someone can benefit from, they're sharing those nuggets. And so I try to do that when it's possible because I've been the beneficiary and recipient of some of those over the years. And so I think it's an important part of leadership is to try to convey the things that help others succeed. 100%. So that's what I focus that speech on and continue to try to do that when I can on a daily basis.
Yeah. No, that's that plays out in how I see you carry yourself throughout your day to day, and I appreciate you sharing this time today and some nuggets with us today.
Hopefully, we'll get a few.
Yeah. Can you share a memorable instance where supporting someone else's idea led to an unexpected breakthrough for Polo?
Yeah. Well, I can say with reassurance that it happens all the time. Fortunately, I shouldn't be, nor do I want to be, the only one that has ideas for the vision and future. So it happens a lot. It's happened in probably every facet of our company, from IT to sales to production, whether it be a new facility, an offshore, an import partner. So it's so numerous that it thankfully happens all the time. We're currently embarking on all kinds of technology advancements. A lot of them aren't my idea, but they're good ones. And I think advancing someone else's idea is part of leadership.
Excited about some of those technological enhancements and programs that we're embarking on that will lead Polo into the future, and I think you have plenty of experience with that when you made some pretty high stakes decisions in terms of helping come to a decision. I guess at least with the ERP system that we've been utilizing as a company, and really have gotten to a point where it's humming, and all the data that goes in and out is very useful to drive our KPIs and performance.
And we view technology, Sean, as you are aware, not to displace jobs, but to assist people in their jobs.
Yeah.
And so you have to be forward thinking, not necessarily the first to do something,
right?
But be on the edge of the technology somewhat, so your teams can prosper with all the data that's thrown at us every day.
Yeah, and it's funny because I came from a university, and I was impressed with Polo's IT right out of the gate when I got to Polo 3 years ago now. It's like, wow, this company really punches above its weight, and it's amazing as a 75-year-old company because one of the customers we work with, they basically started from scratch with their tech stack, and I was like, how amazing would that be? But to hear, we had people programming things and working on their own systems for years, and now to see where it's at is impressive in its own right. Because a lot of big companies, are still running on antiquated systems.
Yeah, and there's so many opportunities for improvement. Back in the day when we started, it was a mainframe environment, and we quickly realized. Quickly over 30 years that that the way of the world was going with ERP and hosted types of systems.
Yep.
And in order to be relevant and be able to compete, we had to make that change. And so we did a lot of discovery on that. And I think one of our board members at the time said, it'll be 5 years before you realize the benefits from it. And I think that was spot on. I think we're in year 8 or 9, something like that. And it did. It took 5 years to kind of get our arms around it. And now we're reaping the benefit and doing additional add-ons to it and features that are not quite as strong as we need them to be. And so it's a constant reinvention.
How do you approach decision-making when there's not a clear right or wrong kind of track?
Sure.
As comes up from time to time in a custom manufacturer.
In any business, there's a lot of pain points on lack of clarity or the lack of black and white, as we say. And I always approach it, and you've heard this saying, I'm sure numerous times, that we pay our talent to interpret the gray areas. If everything were always black and white, to exaggerate the point, you could say, just have a manual and go to that section in the manual, and there's the answer. Well, that's never the case. You can have guidelines, and you can have precedent, and best practice. Those are always encouraged. Sure. But the gray area is where you have to maneuver well because it could go either way. And I think the other thing I'd like to say or mention about that is, I also say that the more emotional a decision, meaning if it's policies or something that impacts a large group of people, internal stakeholders or external, the more emotional that decision, the more facts needed to make it. And I've always tried to live by that, to where, hey, that means proper due diligence and don't take shortcuts.
Right.
And typically, that's a pretty solid foundation for arriving at the right answer. And then don't be afraid to realize a mistake. If something didn't go quite right, which is very common, be willing to say, well, I didn't work like I anticipated. Maybe hit it in the reverse for a little bit and then go forward again. So those are just some things I think that are fundamental to really any type of company that a person is in charge of or is influencing as a stakeholder.
Some nuggets.
There you go. I hope it is.
100%. Yeah, I heard another local business leader speaking, and he was like, even if you have the best guidelines, some of your top performers even are probably going to do it about 80% of the way that you want it done. Yeah. And you have to be comfortable with that. It doesn't have to be just this way or just that way, but if it's in that quadrant of going in the right direction where the customer's needs are being met, of course, right. Everybody's got a little bit of their own style in how they do those things.
And if you venture too far off course from that percentage, you get into micromanagement.
Exactly.
I don't know exactly what percent that is, but different people have different tolerances. I like to live in a way or lead in a way that give people their own autonomy, because if a person tries to influence 100%, to your example of the 80%, so much can fall through the cracks because there's only one person. It's better to be 80% and come back and tweak something than try to micromanage it all. Yeah, to me, it comes out a lot better in the long run.
It didn't take us long to get back to this whole pressure topic here, and we now banter back and forth a lot about how pressure is a privilege. And I wanted to know, where did that come from, and what does that mean to you, Kent?
That phrase was coined by Billie Jean King, the tennis great. I'm kind of a tennis enthusiast with a little bit of background in tennis, and that her saying or quote
That's being
is
modest.
Well, no, many years ago, is on the tennis center, and it's in the entryway before players enter the stadium court at the U.S. Open. It's such a great saying in that to be in the arena of competition, whether it's sports or business or whatever it is, usually people have worked either very diligently on their education or their craft to be there in the first place. So to be able to compete at a high level in anything, it's really a privilege to be in the game. And so I think if a person thinks of it that way, it's a healthy, motivating way to go about one's day-to-day. Is, it'd be easy to sit and do nothing. Not probably a good thing for anyone, but it's more difficult to rise to the challenge every day. And so it is a privilege to be selected to do that in any kind of venture.
Things don't always go the way that we want them to go. I don't know why the universe doesn't just center around each individual and it just gives us everything that we want. But what I do appreciate too, beyond just pressure as a privilege and the perspective that you bring to those situations in particular, sleep on it.
Absolutely.
Give it a day. You can pout today, whatever.
Yeah.
But sleep on it and see how you feel about it in the morning.
Yeah. If a person's passionate about something and also an emotional decision, like I pointed out earlier, it's always good to sleep on it. And if you feel as passionate about it the next day, after good rest and sleep or exercise, that'll do a lot of wonders as well.
Yeah.
It kind of puts it in perspective. What might have seemed like an insurmountable obstacle prior day might not be as big of a mountain the next day. It's always good to take a breath and go at the challenge the next day too. Yeah. So it's rare, sometimes mandatory, that we have to make a snap decision right now. Those happen, and but they're a little more rare than you think.
And I don't want to just blow over that, modest, dabbled in tennis type of response that you had earlier, because you did play college tennis at Washburn University here in Topeka. And when I was playing tennis, you would still kick my butt around the court and just, put me all over the place, running down balls. And go to, sectionals and nationals with your USTA team still. So, definitely watch out for this guy on the courts. That's for sure.
Well, I feel on that one, Sean, that if I'm at it long enough, I can beat some people that I couldn't beat before. So it's just a matter of outlasting them, maybe.
Yeah.
But, no, it's been a fun journey with that. Back in the conversion from wood rackets to aluminum type of era, that's a long time ago. It's a very different game today. We didn't have the power that these athletes have today. But it's fun to follow those who have that. So
U.S. Open and some of the Washburn matches today, it's just incredible, the pace of the
different sport. At a much higher level than when I played, for sure. So.
Well, I guess this is a manufacturing podcast and not a tennis podcast, but it was a good rabbit hole there. So, and this one's tough for me to reference, and we're apparently getting personal on this one, but somebody who I just cannot stand, but I respect is a gentleman that recently retired from coaching college football. And I may have been dancing through the hallways of Polo and jumping up and down, rejoicing that Nick Saban retired. But I do respect him. I do want to just say War Eagle to my Auburn friends out there. But what is it about Nick Saban's philosophy and about what he did as a coach to put people in a place for everybody to be their best?
Well, first of all, I respect Auburn, so War Eagle to all those folks out
thank
there.
you. Thank you.
I've got several friends on the Auburn side of that as well, but I think I've listened to Nick speak several times, not in person.
But before we get into that, this podcast is brought to you by Polo Custom Products. We are a custom manufacturer that specializes in sewing, sealing, and thermoforming. We work with project engineers, sourcing professionals, and buyers to design, engineer, and manufacture products that cannot afford to fail. If you're interested in working with us, visit our website at www.polocustomproducts.com and fill out a request for quote form. Now, back to the show.
I think he's got some great motivational tactics and was very successful in his craft. And the one, and I'm probably going to botch it, but he says when you played football for him, he said the default mode that most people are in terms of ability are average. He said you can be one of about four things. You can be average, you can be good, you can be excellent, or you can be elite. We want athletes to leave here after they become elite. And with that becomes the mentality that you have to be willing to do what others will not do to become elite at whatever you do. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was excellent in the way he framed that, in that it doesn't happen by accident. You know, the elite, I know we use athletics a lot in our comparisons and some of our storytelling. It's not without hard work, and people who have become the best at what they do constantly look at ways to improve. So I just really, really thought that was a very succinct way to put it. Hey, we want people to embrace moving from average to elite, but it's not without a price.
Just to add to the things that I don't like to admit I respect about Saban is his focus on the process. I mean, their process is so succinct that, you know, when they're in high pressure situations, it's not the scoreboard. It's not how many seconds are on the clock. It's what you are doing in that play and maximizing what you can do. And it speaks to the elite level of performance and the elite kind of mind frame they have out there on the field.
And keep in mind, too, Sean, elite doesn't mean it's error-free.
Right.
Tennis is a great example of that.
Yeah.
I mean, the great Roger Federer gave a commencement speech recently and cited several statistics of his, and he's arguably one of the greatest of all time.
So good.
And the number of points he won over his career was 54%. So I would think most people would think that was 90%. But look at the difference. Look at the amount of mistakes that is. But he was able to be successful. So it's not elite doesn't mean zero errors.
Right.
It just means the ability to overcome them.
Yeah.
So
yeah. No, that's such a good thing to be reminded of. One of the best tennis players in the world won 54% of his points. But I imagine he won the points that mattered. A lot, you know, and it reminds me of somebody else, you know, a local athlete, Patrick Mahomes, who's, you know, had so many playoff appearances, so many Super Bowl appearances already in a short career span. But that's one of the, I don't remember the stats, but it, like the game winning drives when they're down, he's got some of the most out there, and he makes mistakes all the time. But when it matters, he comes through in the clutch.
Yeah, I think that most high performers have to learn from the mistake, like we all do. But they're able to shift mental gears quickly, put it behind them, and have a short memory at the same time having learned from it.
Right.
That's not easy to do because you've got to learn from it and then let go. So that's where kind of the pressure's a privilege thing comes from. You work hard to be in the competition, and so it's a privilege to be able to learn and adapt because things constantly change, evolve, and more often than not, there's nuances or wrinkles to something that was not anticipated.
Could you talk about Polo's culture and what you consider to be one of our number one pillars of success at our company?
Sure, Sean. I think culture is probably the top one. I've got really four that jump out: culture, vision, strategy, and talent. They're all important, but I think culture jumps out because if you have all the other three and not a good culture, it can be a challenge and offset the advantages in the other pillars of success. So culture by far to me is the number one thing to protect. We spend so much time at work or connected to something related to work. It's hard to put that behind. So I believe you want to be in a work environment that you enjoy. And if you're considering the day-to-day office strategy and executing things, the war room, you want people that you want to be in there with that have the same set of values that the organization does and that you can trust. And so it's one of those things where, unfortunately, some companies only realize it was great when they're absent of a good culture. We don't want to be one of those. So we want to keep that intact, be protective of it. And I think that any incoming talent appreciates that when they hear some of the things that we do to keep it at a high level on the culture aspect.
Polo's got an awesome culture. Then it's been a lot of fun. We work hard, play hard, really establish true partnerships with our customers, and it's a special place, special environment, good time to be at Polo Custom Products.
Definitely, and I think that it's all intertwined. You know, I like to, in my day-to-day, be in one of those quadrants of the pillars to move the company forward, and they are related. And so that's kind of where I like to be. Executing the vision and the strategy going forward is be working in those four pillars. The culture applies to everyone, and the success applies to everyone. So
for sure.
I firmly believe that that's oftentimes can be taken for granted and shouldn't be.
So how do you balance striving for excellence versus perfectionism?
Well, I think on perfectionism, it's very, very costly to have or endorse an environment where perfectionism is what's expected when you first come out of the gate. We expect perfectionism for our customer internally to all the things that go on to manage the people, the organization, operations. It's an imperfect world, and perfectionism comes at a high cost. If that's expected out of the gate with a lot of things, then to me, it needs to be thought of as a goal and not really expected early on. Some perfectionists, there's nothing wrong with that. Just realize that it's a goal to strive for, and it's one of those things that's difficult to attain. So expecting perfection within an organization has to be weighed with not being stymied by lack of progress or paralyzed. You've heard of paralysis by perfection or something to that nature.
Analysis paralysis.
Yeah. If a person or a company or organization hits that too early, it prevents a company from moving forward. I mean, we talked a little bit about the IT advancements.
Right.
That's by far an imperfect world. Now there's some do's and don'ts that we cannot maneuver outside of. Right. But I think that a good leader should define the ditches in terms of, hey, I'm not expecting perfection. Here are the ditches of success and ones that an area that you don't want to venture into because it's too costly for the company. So rather than seek perfection with input from other people in the organization, provide some guidelines on what success looks like and then get there. If those aren't provided, then the person feels like they can never really get out of the gate. I'm scared to death to make a mistake.
Yeah.
So there's all these other nuances to perfectionism that are costly in terms of financial and from a motivational standpoint. So the good news is, with a lot of managerial experience,
Right.
a person can convey a little more easily through a lot of history what that success, a good foundation for what that looks like, and provide those ditches.
One of the examples that you brought up reminded me of a boss from many, many jobs back, where it was like, I found out what to do through doing something, and then them saying, no, don't do this, and this. I was like,
Jumped in.
Well, that would have been good to know up front, but yeah, thank you.
Now, some things, when the consequences of failure aren't
Right.
high,
Yep.
that's okay.
Right.
There aren't a lot of those
Right.
in the business world, but there are some. And knowing the difference, costing the company a few $1,000s versus $1 million mistake,
Right.
One needs to be ready to make that delineation
Yeah.
and provide guidance.
What's your view on failure, and how does it relate to professional development?
A lot can be learned from it. And again, you have to be willing to accept it, be able to coach a person through it. Some people, or all people, handle failure differently. And I think from a leadership perspective is knowing how to address with that individual how to overcome it. Since everyone's personality is different, you can convey the same message on how to overcome failure or take risks, but you want to do it in their preferred, comfortable method of communication and what their personality
Right.
accepts more than other things.
Whether it's a production associate or a product development person. And I know that you always do a really good job of knowing your audience and speaking to what's relevant to them and what's relevant to their role within the company.
Yeah, I believe that on that, knowing your audience is really, really key. A person can deliver the same information and be consistent with the company information or whatever it is, but deliver it in a way where it can resonate better with the audience. I don't say things the exact same way to executive team members as I do plant associates, because I want to focus on the aspects that they're most interested in.
Right.
So I'll deliver the same message, hey, we're doing well, or we've got a challenge, and I'll be honest about that. But I'm a little bit more aware of how I frame it to where the audience at the time can relate to it in the best way.
How do you balance the difference between confidence and humility?
It's great to be confident in what you do, but I think that part of our culture is that we don't have a lot of ego with it. So I think confidence without the ego is where we try to be. And that means, to me, admit when you're wrong, accept the responsibility if something's wrong within a department that you lead, and be willing to, like we touched on earlier, advance someone else's idea. Lacking humility, or maybe letting ego come into play, is it can create some blind spots and lead to complacency. So I think being grounded in anything that a person pursues is the right way to go about it. You can be confident that you're good at what you do. That's fantastic, and you want to have that.
Right.
And learn by mistakes, but don't become arrogant because of it. And I think that we've all seen numerous examples where somebody goes a little too far,
Yeah.
and they get put in their place pretty quickly.
Yeah. I feel like you see examples of that a lot with people that have done well in business and think they could do X, Y, and Z really well too. And I guess not everybody's Elon Musk that can.
Right. There's not a lot of those.
Yeah.
And I think that also touches on the fact that the more input you have with your leadership team, and really folks, depending upon what the challenge is,
Right.
whether it's production floor, whatever part of the organization, the more folks you have giving input, it keeps one focused on the results,
Right.
and leads one to avoid complacency.
So Kent, what drives you as a leader? What's your biggest motivator?
My number one that jumps out, of course, I focus on the results of the company, and I want all of our stakeholders to have confidence in the direction of the company. That's a given. But what I really, really enjoy is not only the challenge and being privileged with pressure, I guess.
Yeah.
I really enjoy seeing others in the organization reach their goals, or become the best at what that they desire to become really good at. And I also think what a person likes, they get really good at. So I like to see people doing the things they enjoy, part of the culture.
Yep.
And I like to see, and it's gratifying to me to see them get really good at it. There's been numerous examples over the years with us being, especially when we were a smaller company, where people would wear multiple hats and they hone in on one area and become really, really good at it. And they end up being an expert in their area. And that's extremely gratifying to me as a leader, no matter what part of the company somebody is a part of. To me, it's fun. It's gratifying. So I applaud the success of others more so than anything perceived of my own. And that's one thing that really motivates me every day. I love seeing all these people come together, different ethnic backgrounds, different beliefs, different areas of expertise, and come together for the common cause, and see them really, really develop into a professional. So that really kind of jumps out at me as what makes me motivated every day.
What you were saying, that there's a Colin Powell quote that I'm going to butcher, but basically it was, leadership is getting people that don't know each other to work together, to do work they didn't want to do, to achieve things they never thought was possible.
Yeah, that's really good. You probably did butcher it, but I get the meaning of that. So
it sounds like what you were talking
it's
to.
a great leadership to be able to pull all the people together on a common vision, and knowing that each piece, each position, each person in the company contributes. If we're doing something right at Polo, the pyramid ought to be flipped over, and I should be at the bottom serving everyone else. And so it's just gratifying to see others excel.
We did that in that strategy exercise where we basically did a similar thing to Home Depot, which was that inverted pyramid, and you were gracious enough to allow us to have you at the bottom of that, where really, I mean, where we said what's at the top of the pyramid is our associates, our people that are on the front line that are making the products. And then you've got their management, and then you've got all the corporate structure. And then, this guy down there at the bottom has got to balance it all. And so you're a great leader for Polo, and a gracious one for letting you put us down at the bottom of that pyramid, and really living up to some servant leadership standards.
Anything for the team on that one. But I do remember that exercise, and the pyramid, I don't know if you remember what I said, is when it was flipped over, it became a diamond. So it's another way to think of that if you've got leadership in the right perspective. So
why is communication so important in today's workforce?
I believe, first of all, that is probably the number one trait that people coming out of college or coming out of school could improve upon. A lot of the folks today have grown up on the digital devices. Nothing wrong with that. It's a lot of information. The problem is it's a lot of information that most people have been accustomed to texting and email and things like that. So to me, there's a huge opportunity and a big gap of opportunity for people who can still communicate face-to-face do interviewing and all kinds of face-to-face interaction, relationship building techniques will become one of the biggest opportunities, in my opinion, because there's been a long time where it hasn't been focused upon.
Right.
And so I see that in folks that come through Polo and interview from time to time. I believe that if a person focuses on that, and maybe without, I always tell people, I've never seen anybody that over-communicated. If someone over-communicates, I'll tell them, I'll let them know.
Yeah.
If I over-communicate, please tell me. I'll dial it back.
Right.
It never happens.
That's not
So
the
I
common
think that,
complaint.
Yeah, it's not a common complaint. So knowing that, I think it's been exaggerated to not enough communication. So I think a person should strive to give a little bit, try to predict a little bit better what the audience's next question would be after they see your communication, and maybe strive to include it. Mm-hmm. Hey, have that to me as soon as possible. Well, how about a date and something to where someone on the other end can interpret that without going back and forth 10 times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think communication is paramount to any position, anybody wanting more leadership. You've got to be able to openly communicate with your team, and to be a leader, I think it's something that can always be improved upon.
What you said, even like the subtle things of, I need it by this date for this reason. I'm not just, trying to set hard deadlines for you. There's this perspective as to why, our customers got this date that they need it by, because they've got a assembly on top of what we're sending them, and it needs to be to the government by X date. And so, those types of, that amount of context helps somebody understand why we're not just asking people to jump for no reason,
Yeah, and a lot of communication needs to be prefaced that it's not urgent. So that's the other part of it. Right. Some people interpret communication as that has to be done today.
Right.
Wouldn't it be great to get a text or an email that says, hey, I don't need this right away.
Yeah.
Next Thursday would be great.
Yeah.
Put that in there. Give them a little bit of runway. Because if somebody is always claiming that something's urgent, needed yesterday, guess what? They're never going to get something that really is urgent in the time frame they need. Mm-hmm. So I think not only urgent things that are really urgent need to be clarified, but things that can be delayed.
That's a great point. Yeah. Yeah. Flip side of that's important too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, could you share a little bit of your framework for maintaining perspective of, where you've been, where we are, where we're going when it comes to our business?
Sure. I think that our business, along with any businesses in general, there seems to be a common shortcut or challenge in which the leader doesn't effectively, in my opinion, communicate where they've been, where they are now, and where they're trying to go. The worst thing you can do is expect high performance and not provide all three of those. At least have metrics on what measurement of success you want people to focus on. You don't want to just go out and say, hey, I want you to work harder.
Right.
That doesn't do anything but add confusion. Mm-hmm. Here's what I need. Here's where we want to be. And here's how we're going to measure it. In the past, this is what we've been able to achieve. Give context with the historical, make it brief, but then also tell everyone where we are today and where we want to be, and rely on them to help the team get there. Oftentimes, unfortunately, all three phases of that communication are absent.
Right.
Or there's maybe only one of the three. I think a lot of people can cite examples where, gosh, I don't really know what I'm expected to do. Well, that's a leadership failure if somebody is feeling that way, because every every position's critical if we're hiring for it, and we better be prepared to articulate the role of that person by individual and by the organization. So we're intentional about strategy, mapping out how we win, and then putting in place the fundamentals and the resources to get there. Without that degree of focus, then I think a company can meander off course. Now, are there changes needed from time to time with strategy? 100%.
Right.
I think being agile to adapt in those situations is absolutely critical. But be sure to be honest with your team about those three things: where the company's been,
Right.
Where it is now, and where we're going. And a lot of times that can be quantified, and you can motivate a lot of high performers by sharing that information.
Right. Something you said reminded me of our board chair's description of strategy, which is, where do you want to play and how do you want to win? And I think that's a pretty effective way to think about strategy and everything that you're talking about, getting everybody rowing in the same direction. And if you're all rowing in the same direction, if you have that vision, you can really make a wave in the industries that you serve. For sure.
And be willing, like we talked about, be willing to maybe change that from time to time and adapt if certain landscapes change, recognizing it. And that's where listening to some others comes into play.
Yep.
There's others in our industry, external stakeholders, that see things that we may not, and it's important to listen to them. If they see a trend, they see something that could be changed to the benefit of everyone. It's where a lot of listening goes a long way.
Sometimes you make decisions on strategy based off of information at the time, and something might change, and you gotta adapt. But thankfully, we have served a variety of industries and been well diversified, and that's served us well over 75 years. When one industry is hit by XYZ phenomenon, and one of the other industries ends up doing well and better. And so we've definitely seen that even as recently as this fun pandemic that we have in the rearview mirror. So anyways, all really well said. Well, speaking of the pandemic, this is one that we don't have to always talk about the pandemic, but I do feel like what this question is relevant in terms of what communication tactics have you found to be effective in a leadership role during challenging times?
The more transparency, the better.
Yep.
And honesty about the challenge.
Yeah.
When the pandemic really, really brought that to light, I did several videos because I couldn't make it to each plant location.
Right.
Things were locked down. Every day there was something different, a new challenge. Mm-hmm. We remained open as an essential manufacturer, and we didn't want our production associates to feel like we were open at their expense of their health.
Right.
So it was some delicate communication, and frequent communication was needed to convey the right message on that. So I would say during challenging times, communicate even more. Be transparent. Tell them what the challenges are and where we're struggling, and you won't be disappointed. I think trying to be opposite of that is detrimental. Mm-hmm. And then that way they develop, the organization as a whole develops a trust in leadership. And if it's communicated at each level of the organization, that the trust factor can't be overvalued. They'll do anything to help the company move forward. Mm-hmm. And so I think what we tried to do during those challenging times during COVID was communicate every day. We had some kind of memo, and once a week or every 7 to 8 days, we would do a video on, hey, here's what we're doing differently. Here's how we're trying to make the work areas safer. And I think everybody really, really appreciated the fact that we were honest. We never navigated that before.
Right.
And we were honest with that.
Yeah.
We're doing some things that we're not sure if it'll work. However, we're going to make the health of each person the paramount over anything else. And we were able to accomplish that because people had trust in the process.
No, that's a huge deal, and I'm glad we weathered that storm. That was, I'm sure, very intense times and a lot of deliberating to figure out how to navigate those waters.
Yeah, it was not something that we want anytime soon.
Yeah. NVIDIA CEO, who he's got some, he doesn't believe in direct reports or something like that. So I feel like he's got like 60 people in the room while they're making decisions, and everyone can hear how they think through those things and then kind of take that out across their parts of the organization. But that much decentralization sounds inefficient too, but their stock price is doing well, so they must be doing something right over there. But I think it touches to your point of as much transparency as possible.
Transparency is good. To that point that you brought up, usually extremes get you in trouble. Extremes positive can be bad.
Yeah.
Extreme negative can be obviously bad.
Right.
So the extremes, which we hear every day about certain events,
right,
are usually the places that make navigating through life more difficult. Somewhere in the middle is the right answer. Yeah. And I think that that's where we try to be. We can have extreme views and thoughts, but I think at the end of the day, we're going to be in an area that's avoids the extreme thinking and rational and scalable, and can be executed.
I was trying to find a way to get a Ricky Bobby quote in here, and I guess if you're not first, you're last isn't the Polo mentality. That's a little extreme, but we found a way to get Ricky Bobby into this podcast. So
excellent, yeah. If you're not first, you're last.
Awesome. Well, again, Kent, thank you so much for your time and choosing to be here for a second appearance. We really appreciate you. And there were tons of nuggets scattered throughout that conversation, and we really appreciate.
Well, I haven't said a whole lot that people haven't heard before, but maybe reiterating a few things can be impactful for 100%. Some folks, and kind of get a glimpse on what's motivating to me, and therefore people can understand kind of what drives the organization. And so I'm definitely a fan of being present and being out front in terms of first one in harm's way, last one through the buffet is one of my quotes. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. That's the line to end on. I like that. Thanks, Kent.